In the eyes of many people, today marks a very important day. The time has finally come. Throughout the course of this band's career, I've never actually said a word about them. The principal reason isn't necessarily because of dislike or distaste, or even disinterest. It's based around the fact that I just hadn't really actively sought them out. With a lot of the other bands that I've spoken illy about, it's been because I've experienced the product, and have been able to really fabricate my own opinion. Things that I say aren't based around what people publicly say. It's about the feelings, the opinions, and the examination that I do personally, and then replicate them and create those remarks to speak to all of you. Reincarnate by Motionless and White. A band that many people have figured, or probably assumed that I had covered before. A band that definitely has some polarizing ability. There are those that are deep within the sinister metal department that love these guys, and those on the outside that do not. And that's also flip-flop. There are those that really don't like metal, that really enjoy Motionless and White, and consider them to be the deepest that they're willing to go, whereas people within the heart of the metal community can't stand these guys. It's probably true of any band. However, this is definitely one that has drawn a lot of polarity. Maybe not as much as some of their contemporaries, but let's move on from basics. Reincarnate is an album that is highly regarded. It's one that was highly anticipated. There was a lot of hype that really centered this. In fact, one previous reviewer for a magazine, for a publication, gave the album a 10 out of 10, but yet said that they really hadn't established a personal identity. It's kind of critical. It's kind of important. Why are you giving it a 10 out of 10 if they don't have their own identity? Isn't that something that principally would, keep you from doing such a thing? Wouldn't that be something that maybe would give you the cause to maybe make it an 8? This is great. I really love what they've done. I love the craftsmanship, but they don't sound unique. Well, I'm going to make it pretty simple, ladies and gentlemen. I'm actually not going to fuck around. I'm not going to give something a score just because I fucking want to. I'm going to do so based around the album. What I've been able to determine about Motionless and White is that there's two sides to this band that oftentimes morph and combine in their songs in order to create something that does feel a bit unique, but at the same time it's no different than what we've heard from somebody such as a Marilyn Manson. They combine the industrial idea, they combine the dark wave idea with metallic ideas such as metalcore or maybe a little bit of deathcore. Some people even call it alternative metal, maybe throwing in some of the same indicators that you would get from a band like Lacuna Coil with some female vocals in the background every so often, or at least in one that I can specifically mention. The result is actually that these guys have one side of them that's actually pretty well tailored for what they do, and the other side just kind of feels like it's there, they want it to be there, but it's not nearly the best side. It's actually the weaker of the two halves, if you really want to go with that whole idea. Which side's which? I'll let you know. The metal side, the one that's actually, doing the heavy guitar work and all that other happy horse shit, the stuff that we typically talk about on this channel, that's actually the weaker side. The dark wave side, the one that has, influences that could potentially be named within, Depeche Mode or other house music, or KMFDM, considering they've worked with one of the members of that band on a couple of tracks, and actually he produced one of their previous albums. That's the stronger side. That's the side that I'd actually see, or would like to see explored more. I'm probably crazy, aren't I? The song Wasp. 7 minutes, and you should know, if you admire the track listing with the time amounts right next door, that 7-minute track was going to be the one that piqued my curiosity instantaneously. The reason for that is because you look at the rest of them, and it just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's different. And those are always the ones that harbor the most opportunity. Albums can be lost, or really gained or saved based around those lengthy tracks. Wasp definitely did that for me. Principally because here's a track that almost leaves metal completely behind. It decides to be devoid of it. It decides to really scavenge more from the industrial playbook, from the dark wave playbook, to create something a little bit more melodious, to really create something that has a little bit more of an atmosphere behind it, something that builds with a lot more character and feels a lot more individual. It's a simpler song. It's one that doesn't really require a whole lot of excessivity in order for it to really work. And that's why it does. 7 minutes, it's simplified, it has atmosphere, it goes somewhere, it feels complete, there's a song. And it's from that, more dark wave, more industrial, that side. The metallic side, it's a yawner. It is. Quite frankly, there's not very much about this band that I find tremendously appealing. The reviewer that stated that it didn't feel like they had that much of an identity was actually halfway right. They're working to build an identity. They're working to really craft something. But whenever you have two sides that are kind of converging together, that doesn't instantaneously mean that that new sound that you've really kind of pioneered, or at least are trying to help to do so, is immediately going to give you that certain amount of, uniqueness from the remainder of the people within your own department. Those people that say that these guys sound tremendously like Marilyn Manson are kind of way off on that, considering Manson has a different way of going about things, and Motionless in White tries to really tread the line between their two sides, and tries to do so with a little bit more tact. Whereas Marilyn Manson is firmly constructing something within one certain style, and it just happens to have a heavy texture to it. With Motionless in White, the two sides that are kind of converging together are a little bit better defined, and it's something where within the tracks, you can definitely tell where the change is going to occur. But then we get to the shortcomings. Danny Filth makes a guest spot on the song Puppets 3, the grand finale. Does everything that Danny Filth is a part of, from his own music in Cradle of Filth to his, roles that he's playing on other albums, have to start with that shrill, very noticeable and very recognizable howl? Do we need to know, is this his form of, Ludacris saying his name? He has to go, ah, right at the beginning of it, because it's really getting old, and it's really getting noticeable. It's to the point where the first thing that I expected to hear out of this song was that. And whenever it happened, I wasn't surprised. Whenever it happened, I realized that that's really how typical it's become. The song itself isn't bad, but really, this is just one of those opportunities that feels kind of pointless. Kind of that they called on an effort from a friend, just, to have a little bit of extra power. To have that extra, person decide to look at the album and see, oh, Danny Filth is on this. I want to pick this up based around that. There's also a guest spoof from Maria from In This Moment. That was decent. Kind of. That's the thing. Whenever I listen to the rest of this album, by comparison to a track as, stand out-ish as Wasp, I immediately realized that this is a band that would be better off if they stuck with that sound. Now, I know that sounds like I'm being really kind of, subjective. I'm not being objective at all. And that I'm just, going off of what I liked, and that's the only thing that should matter. No. From a construction standpoint, from a songwriting standpoint, and from an overall standpoint, that's the most competent work that's on the album. And it's the one that definitely generates the most interest. The song also feels like it really has a lot of room to breathe. It feels like it could go in different directions, and actually within writing this song, that there still was a tremendous amount of freedom that could have been given. This is a song that I feel that easily could have gone on longer, that they could have done a little bit more with. It opens up the remix opportunities, and I know that a lot of people in metal don't like to hear that word, but it's there. Think about how Ministry has been able to do great things with remix albums in the past. Motionless in White could do that too. They could definitely do that with Wasp. You could have 10 different people do it and have 10 different songs. And each and every one of them would have an individuality to it, but at the same time also be able to retain the fact that, people would know that it's the song Wasp. That's something that, at least for this band, really makes them creative. You listen to a lot of those other tracks, and really if you fuck around with them too much, if you do too much with them, they almost just sound like every other song. There really isn't that much of a discrete difference, and there's nothing that really sets them apart from many other bands within this scene. The fact that they're trying to converge these two styles together isn't really all of that interesting. That's the problem. It's not all of that interesting. The fact that one side really exhibits itself better than everything else, and it's something that's only done once, as opposed to on a huge basis with the remainder of the body of the album. That's what's troublesome to me. Am I knocking these guys? Am I hating on these guys? Probably sounds like I am. Probably sounds like I'm just being the same egomaniacal, one-sided asshole that everyone always thinks that I am. But I'm actually just trying to be constructive here. I'm actually just trying to deliver a constructive opinion. I'm actually trying to indicate that, well, the band does have something that they're tremendously talented at, whereas the other side of their sound really needs a lot of help. So, in a way, that guy that said that they're really searching for an identity was definitely true. He's definitely right. Because one side definitely feels developed, whereas the other side really sounds typical. It sounds like just about anything else that you're going to hear. That being said, it makes it very, very difficult in order for me to really get behind a band like this. To me, even though they have this potentially interesting angle and these two interesting styles converging together, I'm instead kind of just left disappointed. Left feeling like I expected a whole heck of a lot more. Like I walked into this album wanting to be surprised, wanting to be shocked, and wanted to pleasantly walk out of this and state that this was a tremendous experience and one that I encourage everybody to take. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Unfortunately, I can't really say much about that, because everything else just feels kind of droll. And that's the problem with these scenes that are, out there today. The metalcores, the deathcores, ones that are trying to splice in, elements of the 80s, either that or elements of, industrial/darkwave. All those things that probably work, considering a lot of the kids were into that whenever these bands were first getting started. It's really kind of reaching the end of its rope, the end of its course. Now it's to the point where nothing sounds all of that original, and really nothing sounds all of that good. Definitely encouraged by Wasp. The album itself flows alright, but it just feels like a sky full of holes. It feels like there's so many opportunities squandered, wasted. The Danny Filth thing just felt useless. That song felt tremendously useless. And everything else felt like a lot of good ideas that, if explored in perhaps a different direction, may have gone somewhere, but instead conceptually just floated in space. The vocals at times can be quite a bit obnoxious, but it's something that's kind of hit or miss, all depending on what song that you opt to play. It's definitely not something that I would consider to be this band's strength. Musicality-wise, it's diverse, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of typicality on this. There's a lot of things that don't feel very fresh. In fact, a lot of things that feel a little bit dated, a little bit aged. But it really just depends on this one what you like. Myself personally, I give it a 61 out of 100. And really, some people may say that I'm being kind with that. Some people may actually think I'm being tremendously kind. Others will think I'm being a complete and utter asshole, and that this album's a 99 out of 100, and the only thing that's not perfect about it is the fact that I'm a dick. I don't know how that makes any difference. They'll find a way. But what did you guys think about this album? What did you think about Reincarnate by Motionless and White? Are you someone that's actually on the bus and, really, really enjoyed this album, or somebody that listened to it and was either disappointed, or maybe you're somebody who's never heard of these guys and gave them a try? What's your first opinion? What's your first reaction? Let me know, because I'm kind of interested on this one, considering this was my first experience. This is a band I'm going to continue to watch and listen to albums and review them, for sure. Principally because I want to kind of see where these guys go, because I still feel like they have a lot of potential. I feel like they have the ability to really be something great. It just hasn't quite clicked yet. Maybe it doesn't have to, but I think it does.